If you've been keeping up with Sonic's most recent game releases, then I'm sure you've been aware of Sonic Racing Crossworlds. The highly acclaimed crossover racing game features not only our favorite Sonic characters, but also DLC characters like Pac-Man, Steve from Minecraft, and SpongeBob? Or my personal favorite addition, Mega Man and Proto Man. Sonic Racing Crossworlds was another positive step forward in what has been this modern renaissance of Sonic, it seems. Especially seeing that 2026 is Sonic's 35th anniversary, it puts a smile on my face seeing that we've had Sonic Frontiers, Shadow Generations, and now Sonic Racing Crossworlds. However, even with Sonic Racing Crossworlds being the current active racing game that's still being supported around his 35th anniversary, this isn't even close to the first time Sonic went racing around his birthday. Oh no! In fact, 20 years ago, Sonic would get a racing game for his 15th anniversary known as Sonic Riders. As this Australian guy said,
"Try it with the sauce, bro. Trust me, you'll like it." Ooh yeah, saucy.
And he was damn right. That has to be the sauciest intro of all time. Everyone here looks great actually. I love these redesigns. Sonic's shoes can be a tad big sometimes, but I love him with high tops, and this does this sporty redesign of these characters with goggles way better than Sonic Boom would go on to do with its obsession with sports tape. Not to mention this shadowy line design that just stylizes the hell out of this animation. It's a shame the rest of the game wouldn't go on to emulate this style. Well, ever since this intro dropped and showed my childhood mind what true swagger is, this game gained what I can only really describe as a cult following within the Sonic community. The Babylon Rogues and the entire concept of extreme gear get a very vocal portion of the community very excited, me included. I mean seriously, Jet the Hawk was so dope to me as a kid, so anytime he comes back, a part of my cold dead heart beats again. But can you really blame me? Back in the 2000s, this type of more stylized racing game along with skateboarding and the general aesthetic of it was super in. You had games like Need for Speed Underground and the Tony Hawk games selling like mad. Loud and in your face was the way to go. Who better than to step foot in the ring other than our favorite Blue Rodent? Since then, whilst amongst fans Sonic Riders is beloved, the game is typically described as hard to play or even get the hang of, with it having pretty mixed critic reviews. I played Sonic Riders growing up when my uncle gifted me a copy on my PlayStation 2. Since then, that copy got damaged and I had to get rid of it, but in high school I got Sonic Riders on the GameCube for like $15 or so. I haven't played it a lot since then, and I haven't even fired it up in a few years. So let's figure out if Sonic Riders is any good or not 20 years later. Firing up the game and getting past that fantastic intro, and we're into the main menu. Although story mode isn't the first choice, we're going straight there where we're greeted with a prompt to make a choice, although hero is our only option. Getting into the hero story starts us off with a CGI cutscene of Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails walking through some futuristic city looking for an energy reading. Suddenly, Jet the Hawk and the other Babylon Rogues blast through a glass window on a building above and crash down onto a highway and begin making their escape. This prompts Sonic in all of his infinite wisdom to stand out in traffic with his arms out. Knuckles, being much stronger than Sonic, does the same and punches Storm the Albatross right off his extreme gear. Point 1 to Knuckles. Sonic, being hip and cool and youthful like the kids, for some odd reason already knows how to ride extreme gear, so he gives chase while stealing Storms. This ultimately leaves him on his ass with a bone to pick with the Babylon Rogues. We then cut to daytime where none other than Mr. Nuke the Moon himself is giving a public announcement for his X-World Grand Prix. Price of admission, 1 Chaos Emerald, winner takes all. Now then, dear viewer, you haven't clicked off this video yet. That means you're an intelligent, sophisticated person or criminally insane. Either way, I ask you, would you trust this bald, alcoholic-looking maniac with all 7 emeralds? Screw that, would you trust him with 1? Sonic immediately comments that Eggman is up to something, but what difference does it make if you're still handing over the emeralds? He's dangerous without even having all 7 emeralds. Why would the authorities even allow this to go on? This is all clearly nitpicking for the sake of poking fun at the story, so in honor of that, Eggman also goes on to deliver this absolute classic of a line. Eggman then goes on to reveal that he has gotten the very Babylon Rogues that crossed Sonic and Crew's path the night earlier to participate, which is enough for Sonic to decide that they are participating. This finally moves us along into the actual game, starting off in Metal City. Not just the first level, but the level you start on. Sonic Riders does something along the lines of SA2 with its racetracks. That is to say, there's what you would call a hero version and a Babylon Rogue version, denoted by the fact that they race on different tracks within their stories. This means that amongst the 16 total tracks, a ton of them are the same general theme, with a few things different here and there at a first glance. Again, at the beginning, that does a lot to make the amount of content or tracks in the game feel a tad small, even when compared to contemporary racers of the time. As you get better at the game and different paths open up due to your skill, that problem lessens by a lot. But if you have to get decent at the game to even get the bulk of the variety, having multiple similar themed stages might come off as padding to a new player. That doesn't immediately write the game off for me, but I feel it important to mention nonetheless. The game also forgoes the idea of racing through memorable locales of the main franchise that most racers tied to an existing franchise do. No, these are all original levels from what I can tell, which does allow the game to carve more of its own identity with this futuristic cyber aesthetic compared to the more lush environments we're used to in most Sonic games. Anyway, on to the actual gameplay. In playing Sonic Riders, one thing becomes strikingly apparent off the jump. This is nothing like any kart racer or racing game you've ever played. The game doesn't control like other racers and has a lot of its own techniques and mechanics. First up, and most important, is this air gauge. You don't have an accelerate button in Sonic Riders. Rather, when this gauge has any air in it, you will go forward. If it depletes, your rider will get off their extreme gear and start running until you fill it back up with air. Air can be gained by doing tricks off ramps, or by tricking while riding the air riders further ahead of you create. If you see red arrows on the verts of these air half pipes, you can pop a trick and gain some air. Characters are also once again divided into speed, power, and flying, allowing them to grind rails, break objects in the stage, and fly off yellow ramps into flying rings respectively. Doing any of these class-specific actions will also gain you air. Air doesn't just allow you to move with your extreme gear, it also allows you to take drifts. Drifts are not like normal racing game drifts, rather they're far more comparable to Kirby Air Ride. Think of it as a brake that allows you to point your extreme gear in the right direction when taking a tight corner, as opposed to something that allows you to drift around a corner like in Mario Kart. Air also allows characters to hit the B button to do a boost. Boosting consumes a chunk of air to gain a burst of speed, but it also does an attack. These attacks are often character specific. For example, Sonic does a spin dash when you boost, but Tails pulls out a giant electrical wire with a male end to bash people with. The air gauge you have on the right can be upgraded by collecting rings, with level 2 coming at 30 rings and level 3 at 60 rings. If you fall off the course or are hit with another character's boost attack, you lose rings and your boost level, meaning collecting rings and maintaining them is directly tied to your ability to maintain your speed. Now then, when comparing this to any, and I mean almost any contemporary racer of the time, and you'd get nowhere near this much involvement just to play. Most of the racing games of the time simply asked you to hit one button to accelerate, one to boost, one to brake, one to drift, and one to use items. This means, unlike a traditional racing game, you aren't just given the tools to go fast right away. Furthermore, you don't start like a traditional racing game either. Before the timer hits 0 to start the race, you and the other racers can back up and get a running start towards the electrified start barrier. Go too soon and you get zapped and stunned, giving all the other racers a big head start. Don't run fast enough and the other racers will also get a faster head start than you. It's about finding a perfect sweet spot. This all culminates in what is one of the single least accessible racing games I've ever seen. I mean, seriously, anytime I've gotten anyone to play the game with me in the years since I bought it, one of the main questions I've gotten was how the hell to control the damn thing. To a new player, all of this is damn overwhelming. It's not enough to just find the shortcuts. It's now about knowing which shortcut is for your character, along with how to even control your character's ability, which isn't explained to you at all. Okay, so the power characters can break things. That's cool. All they need to do is run into an object to smash it. But if the speed characters want to grind a rail, they need to jump above the rail, then hit jump again. Not only is this clunky and can lead to you hopping off and on rails in short succession, but it's not explained to you, nor does it line up with the rest of the franchise. Previously in Sonic games, grinding a rail was as simple as lining yourself up with it and landing on it. Why add this extra input on your jump button of all things? Or how about the flying characters? When you're jumping off other ramps in the game, you typically want to hold down A to charge a big jump so you have more time to do tricks. Well, for the flying characters' ramps, if you try to jump off of them, you'll just do a stupid awkward hop and go nowhere. No, you need to ride off the ramp without inputting anything, despite the fact that's not how the other ramps in the game work. I mean, seriously, that is not well designed at all. It's a shame too, because it's so easy to fix and bring in line with the rest of the game. Instead, it feels like those two mechanics were made easier to mess up when going fast by virtue of being cumbersome and against the grain rather than by being genuinely difficult. With that being said, I think that's the game's main claim to fame here. Sonic Riders is a hard racing game, at least when compared to other racers. Sonic Riders doesn't necessarily concern itself with being a fast-paced, easy-to-pick-up, cocaine-fueled walk in the park. It wants you to learn its mechanics, then gain the ability to go fast through subsequent playthroughs of these stages. Hey, wait a second. Doesn't that kinda sound like the mainline games? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and squirrels, in the same way that it feels satisfying to go fast in a mainline Sonic game through learning your character's abilities and the stage layout and making those split-second decisions, Sonic Riders emulates a lot of those feelings, albeit in a racing game. It feels genuinely satisfying to learn these controls and to constantly get better. This is where I think Sonic Riders unfairly gets a lot of its criticism. Is it inaccessible? Yes, compared to other racing games, absolutely, but underneath that lack of accessibility, you get a unique racing game that constantly requires player input, resulting in there never really being a dull moment even when you've learned the game. Not to call this game the Dark Souls of racing games or anything, but I think nowadays, gamers are more accepting of the notion that some games just take some getting used to, like Dark Souls. Sonic Riders falls within this category to me. I think players are used to difficulty in racing games coming from how the AI performs or how fast the vehicles are. Meanwhile, Sonic Riders does it by asking you to learn the completely different controls and mechanics by progressively giving you harder and harder stages to experiment with. In my time playing this game for the channel, I did 2 complete playthroughs of the story and some additional content like the mission mode, which I'll talk about later. I then went on YouTube and looked at some footage of the game, and you would not believe my shock and awe seeing that there were entire paths in the stages that I did not know existed, despite having a decent grasp of the controls and gameplay. In the same way that there's high paths and low paths in mainline Sonic games, and part of the fun is honing the skills needed to either access the higher paths or maintain them, Sonic Riders does much of the same. The stages are also all memorable enough at least. When playing racing games, there's typically a tempo that I'd like to say you get. You know, when memorizing tracks, you can keep a rhythm of when to do what. When a stage is unmemorable, oftentimes you can never really build that tempo that keeps a racing game satisfying. Through learning the controls and the pretty damn expansive stages with tons of different paths, there's plenty memorable about every stage here, despite the fact that some aesthetics completely blend together. In Egg Factory, for example, you take tons of tight turns. Learning to do that and how the corner taking works takes a moment, but also this stage is the only stage that uses it as heavily as it does. I'm developing habits and muscle memory specific to this stage while getting better because the controls in the stage design naturally give way to that, much like a mainline title would. Sonic Riders also encourages you to get better during the campaign. Normally when we get this split story mode thing in Sonic games, all the characters will follow a very similar difficulty curve. For example, in SA2, the Dark Story isn't that much harder than the Hero Story. Well, here in Sonic Riders, the first few races in the Hero Story will only require you to place top 3. Then when you get to the midway point with Knuckles, the game demands you place first every time. When we get to the Babylon Rogue story, the difficulty doesn't reset. In fact, no, it gets harder. Now you need to play on harder versions of the hero stages while ensuring you end up in first place. It gives the story a really satisfying difficulty curve I think the main games could take note of. Speaking of the story, I'll cut in with that. Sonic's story and the Rogue story occur at the same time. It's just that we're seeing different perspectives. For example, there's a scene where Wave is giving Tails shit on the hero's side, and that is revealed to be the opportunity that they take advantage of to sabotage Sonic's gear on the Rogue side. There's not much of a story here though. Other than the Eggman nonsense, it's revealed on the Rogue side that Eggman was striking a deal with them to find the Babylonian Garden in exchange for the Chaos Emeralds. Everyone races a bunch, finds the garden, they beat up a genie, the Babylonian treasure is revealed to be a flying carpet, and Eggman does whatever the hell this is. I will say that again, I love Jason Griffith as Sonic here, but his performance as Jet is also great. This will always be Jet's voice to me. However, what is genuinely hilarious to me is how often the Babylon Rogues come into a cutscene just to talk shit, only to have their asses handed to them in the race. Normally, different perspectives will have different events occur based on who the protagonist is, but no. Storm even admits to losing to Knuckles at the start of the hero story when we cut to the Rogues. So genuinely I ask, why keep talking shit when you guys keep losing? It doesn't make sense. However, even with the story and all the races that I've mentioned, Sonic Riders doesn't stop there in terms of content. Upon finishing the game, characters like Rouge, Shadow, and Cream are unlocked, as well as a ton of new boards and skates. There's tons to experiment with here. Different characters can ride different boards, and there's plenty plenty of characters to unlock. We also have the mission mode as mentioned. These are challenges on each stage in which you need to do a certain task like smacking enough cars or doing enough tricks. You get rated bronze to gold for each mission you complete, with there being a set of missions for each of the Babylon rogues. If you do all of these and get the gold rating, you will unlock Supersonic. I have personally never done such a thing, but seeing as how I'm loving retro achievements lately, it's something I want to go for. Normally getting Supersonic in some games can be tedious as all hell, and to some, gold ranking every single mission might be, but to me this ties back perfectly into the idea of just getting good at the game and learning to be quick at it. I want to get Supersonic as a point of pride and to show off how good at the game I got, and so my friends know that I am the biggest loser of all time. There's also guest characters, man. Ai from Super Monkey Ball, Knights from Nights into Dreams, and Oolala from Space Channel 5 all make appearances as playable characters. Not just that, but you get like 2 Sega-themed stages that have a ton of callbacks to older Sega titles. And listen, these stages aren't just fan service, they're packed to the brim with alternate pathways and shortcuts and references that actually tie into the stage elements. My only complaint is the lack of Skies of Arcadia representation in this game. At this point, I've glazed the game a lot, but it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. The game drops the ball to me in a pretty serious way for a racer and a Sonic game. The music! It's not bad by any means, but it's really homogeneous and there's no real standout tracks for me. Music taste is subjective, but the main theme that plays with the opening animation is the most memorable song on the soundtrack, and Sand Ruins is also pretty good, but like that's it, and in the grand scheme of the franchise, they're not even that good. I've already mentioned the asinine way they expect you to perform character-specific actions, and how the game isn't accessible to newcomers, which while not being much of a knock against the game for me, it can easily make the game come off as sluggish or unresponsive to a newbie. Sonic Riders only really becomes pick up and play when you know what you're doing. Underneath that though is a stylish as all hell racer with controls that are incredibly satisfying to master and stages that truly act as a playground for all the different things you can do. I wholeheartedly recommend this game to anyone who likes racing games or Sonic games. It's not good in spite of anything, it's just good as hell. There's a learning curve to be sure, but once you learn the game, you get a solid as all hell racing game that will actually grab your attention and make you feel like the speedy badass you should feel like when playing a racing game. This game isn't some miracle of game design or anything, but it's a solid game and I'm happy to have gone through it again. This game cements itself as the best part of Sonic's 15th anniversary, which is the lowest bar of all time, but that's okay. Now then, mastering this game on retro achievements is going to be a completely different beast. Thanks so much for watching. As always, check out some of my other gaming content if you're so inclined, and I'll see you guys next time where I go to Quebec and assault people speaking English so I can fit in. Later!